as were the humiliation and dehumanization of the Palestinian population. I'm quoting now directly from the report. It said that Israel aimed at punishing the Gaza population for its resilience and for its apparent support for Hamas. It said that Israel launched a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population. A deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population. And then it goes on to say, no, this is not a few rotten apples in the barrel. This didn't result from the fog of war. It says the systematic and deliberate nature of the activities leave the mission in no doubt that responsibility lies in the first place with those who designed, planned, ordered, and oversaw the operations. It was the political and military leadership of Israel, the leaders who are in the first place responsible for that terroristic assault on the civilian population in Gaza. The Israelis are so accustomed to impunity when they carry on these attacks year in and year out, that a certain arrogance has entered into their vocabulary. They forgot or forget that at some point it might catch up with them. So Foreign Minister Livni, Tzipi Livni, on January 15th, she went on public and said, "We went wild in Gaza. We showed the Arabs that we went wild in Gaza." And then on January 19th, the day after the end of the invasion, the end of the massacre, she went on Israel's Channel 10 News and she said, "We carried on with real hooliganism in Gaza." Those are her words. Real hooliganism in Gaza, comma, which is what I demanded. And then she's shocked. She's shocked. Like Lieutenant Renaud in Casablanca, she's shocked that she should be served with papers for committing war crimes when she goes to the UK. She seems to suffer from a misapprehension that committing real hooliganism is protected by international law. The Goldstone report, as most of you know, was greeted, if that's the right choice of verbs, was greeted with an outrage bordering on hysteria in Israel across the political spectrum. I'll leave aside the right and the center, and let's look just at what people who are considered progressive in Israel have to say. Israeli President Shimon Peres, the Nobel laureate for peace, he ridiculed the report as a mockery of history. He said that Mr. Goldstone is a small man, devoid of any sense of justice. And then Mr. Perez, the president of Israel, the dove, he proceeded to set the record straight on what happens in the course of Israeli military operations. So he said, is there anyone here from the West Bank? Anyone here from the West Bank? So raise your hand. He explained that Israeli military operations are what brought about economic prosperity in the West Bank. So that was their point, to bring economic prosperity to the West Bank, as anybody who's visited can attest. Now, is anybody here from Lebanon? I've met some people here. Okay. Mr. Perez said Israeli military operations are what liberated Lebanon from the wrath of Hezbollah. And then, lest there be any doubt about the nobility of Israeli military operations, he says that Israeli operations enabled Gaza residents to return to their daily routine. That's what happened in Gaza during those 22 days. And then there was that other peacenik, Michael Oren, the Israeli ambassador to the United States. He didn't mince any words. He said that the Goldstone report was even worse than Ahmadinejad and the Holocaust deniers. It sounds pretty bad. In the United States, the usual suspects, they chimed in the chorus of hate and slander. Alan Dershowitz said that the Goldstone report is so filled with lies, distortions, and blood libels that it could have been written by Hamas, that it recalled the protocols of the elders of Zion, that Goldstone is an evil man, an absolute traitor. And as we all know from having read Elmer Gantry, every circus needs a clown. And so Elie Wiesel joined in, and he called the report a crime against the Jewish people. Well, the question is, what provoked such a hysteria? In fact, the Goldstone report was the last in a long series of human rights reports that came out on what happened in Gaza. Amnesty International published 2 hefty reports. Human Rights Watch published 5 reports. Physicians for Human Rights in Israel published a report. An international medical team published a report. John Dugard published a fact-finding report. And they all reached more or less the same conclusions. In general, the Goldstone report was more cautious and careful in its conclusions than the other reports. So, for example, to give one, if I can give many illustrations, but to give one, Human Rights Watch, as I already stated, called Israel's use of white phosphorus in civilian areas a war crime. Goldstone was more cautious. He called it reckless use of white phosphorus. So, why the hysteria over the Goldstone report? He was simply confirming what all the other human rights organizations had found.